Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Conscious Life Expo Astrology panel. It makes me really happy to say that. You know, 2020 was the very first, well, it wasn't the very first astrology panel, but it was the very first astrology panel that I got to put together. And I've been trying to do it for a number of years. And there's such resistance. But around that time, I said, we're going into 2020, and it's going to be a game changer. We need astrologers. And so ever since then, it's been growing. And this weekend, we have this fabulous panel, and I'm seeing that they left 2 extra chairs here. I could think of a couple of people I would have put in there had I thought about it. But you know what? I love having these 6 astrologers because there's so much going on right now that we're in the midst of, that we're moving through, and that we have potential about. And so we're really going to touch on that during this couple of hours that we have together. And we'll let you ask questions about, last half hour or so if you have some questions. So hold on to them for people. But let me introduce you to people here. I never actually say what I think I'm going to say. I'm going to just da-da-da-da-da-da. Astrology, well, the thing I love about astrology, really for me personally, well, I am going to tell you. I'm going to tell you what I thought about telling you. Okay, let's see. Well, there's no denying we're in the midst of huge changes, right? Everybody agree with that one? Yes. Changes that have shifted the course of humanity in the past and promise, as we look to the near future, mega changes. And in fact, that's what's happening today at this period of time on the planet. And we all saw that with COVID, right? Who expected the whole planet to shut down? Now, we knew something was going to happen. We were here in February 2020. Anybody in the audience here in 2020? Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. So we began talking about what was coming. David was very specific about that. And this group of panelists, many have been here before. So I'm happy to reintroduce them to you, and it's going to be a great day. Okay, so this weekend we're witnessing it, right? We're seeing star seeds. We're seeing about disclosure. We're seeing ancient civilizations, modern day interplanetary hybrid people, AI, the personal and collective empowerment. There is a shift happening, and we, the people, are all feeling it. Now, one of the things I love about astrology is that it shows our interconnectivity, right? People who really aren't into astrology don't understand it. They're kind of like, just what's going on? But when you're into astrology, there's a sense there of, well, sometimes it's just very outrageous, but I know for myself this year, something this year made me shift my perspective and have such hope for humanity. Things that are coming this year, right? Exactly. Thank you. Yes. Thankful to all of us. Anyway, so on this panel, we have in 2020, Kaylin was here. David was here. Okay. All right. Kaylin and David were here in 2020. And then 2021, we were online because nobody could meet. So we had Kaylin and David and, we had Raquel in September 2021 when we were desperate to come back together again. Was anybody here in 2021, the September event? It wasn't quite as big, but it was really, people were so happy to be together. And Rachel Lang was part of that. Astrology was a little bit different. It wasn't really a panel. It was a little different format. Last year, a couple of years ago, Rick Levine came on board. And we've had Rick now is this your 3rd year, Rick? Yeah, Rick. How exciting, right? And last year, Raquel Spring came on board. So this is her second year. And so our brand new Conscious Life Expo Astrology panel astrologist, Gemini Brett. Now, everyone here has diverse opinions, diverse perspectives on things, which is why I love doing astrology panels. I'm Shima Moore, by the way. I'm a co-founder, thank you, co-founder of Conscious Life Expo and your astrology curator. I love bringing information from various astrologers because I believe that everybody has such wonderful things to share, but nobody has all of it. So I think the pieces of the puzzle really help to come together, and you'll hear somebody say something and that will click, and somebody else say something and that'll click, and that's really the whole thing here. So on my right, David Lawrence Palmer, the Leo King, founder of High Vibe TV. It's the largest video horoscope media network and app and spiritual dance music. Anybody enjoy his music? I love it. I love his music. And believe me, after a full day of doing Conscious Life, I'm so happy to have David's music at night because my body just absolutely moves to it because you can't help it, right? And it just shakes out all the weariness of the day. I love it. So we love having him with us. He also has High Vibe TV Lightworker School, where he deciphers the celestial patterns in real life scenarios. And he offers so much on his High Vibe TV app and station. I definitely recommend you check that out. He does things on YouTube all the time, deep astrology. I heard him do an interview downstairs just a little bit ago about the weekend and what was happening there. So, David Lawrence Palmer. And on my far right, Master Astrologer Rick Levine. And I have to say, Rick's cosmic connection on Astrology Hub, who are here, I hope you've all had an opportunity to meet the Astrology Hub people downstairs. They got me through the whole shutdown period because every week we got to, see what was happening, and it was just so really wonderful. So I was delighted when I reached out to Rick and was able to bring him to a live Conscious Life Expo. So he's an award-winning, world-renowned astrologer. He's a founder of Kepler College and co-authored 8 editions of Barnes & Noble Annual Your Astrology Guide, and so much more. Everyone, I could talk about them for days, each one of them. Gemini Brett, I'm going to go to you. Renowned astrologer, shamanic storyteller. His School of Earth Astrology presents a path for embodying the astrological mysteries from the ground up. He helps you realign with the magic of the living sky. And I love his slides and his way of presenting what is some of the complicated stuff about the astronomy. Gemini Brett, thank you and welcome. And so Rick, David, Gemini Brett are all going to be speaking at our post-conference tomorrow. So be sure and check our schedule for that. In the center on my right, Kaylin Castell is an alchemical astrologer, co-founder of Venus Alchemy, My Star Alchemy, and Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. Her visionary understanding is that we inform the mysteries as much as they inform us. And I have been sitting with that for a long time, and it just kind of like the other day, I really got that. So thank you so much for that, Kaylin. And Kaylin and I did a conversation, an astrological conversation on Friday that they'll have DVDs for downstairs. Rachel Lang on my far left, professional astrologer, psychic medium, and author who holds a master's degree from in theology from Loyola Marymount University, just down the road a bit. And she was just elected to
City Council.
City Council, all right? Good timing to get some enlightenment in our political system. And last but not least, on my left, Raquel Spring, fourth generational astrologer, world-renowned speaker, teacher who stands at the forefront of the new evolutionary paradigm of Aquarian consciousness. And I met Raquel up in Mount Shasta area a couple of years ago, and it just happened that she was coming here, and it just all worked out. So the synchronicity of things is just so amazing. I love it. So welcome to all of you today. So we've got a lot of things going on. A lot is happening in 2024. It's a pivotal year in many, many ways. And I'm going to just go through and maybe each one of you touch on the main point or two that what you think about this year and which one of the major transits that we have. We have Pluto just moved into Aquarius. We've got a stellium in Aquarius and during this period of time coming up in February. We have a total eclipse in April. Jupiter and Uranus conjuncting in the end of April, and on, Jupiter changing signs, a lot going on. So let's touch into what each of you have sort of like feels the most relevant. Rick, I know you don't like to start, but can I start with you?
What, an Aries who doesn't like to start? But I have a Cancer moon and I like to go last. I like to be the one that does the cleanup on a panel. Yeah, what can one say in just a few minutes? To do a deeper dive on my perspective, I got the 6 o'clock lecture tonight in the La Jolla room. That's going to be more about how astrology has changed rather than the actual year ahead. And then tomorrow at the post-conference, really digging into the details of how we can work through this time. But I think that all of us on this table will agree that 2024 is a bit of a sleeper year, because when you look at it on paper, there's not as much going on as what actually is going on. I mean, there's no outer planet transits. When I say outer planet, I mean Saturn to Uranus to Neptune to Pluto, that are significant, and yet this is really the breakaway year from March of 2020, which never seemed to end. And so what happens here during this year, with all the planets going direct at the beginning of the year, it's like we finally get forward movement. And then with Pluto moving into Aquarius, which I know a lot of people are going to talk about more specifically, the real thing is that Pluto into Aquarius is just a harbinger for Saturn catching up to Pluto, Saturn catching up to Neptune, and those both moving into Aries, with Uranus moving into Gemini. And it's very unusual. I look back quite a ways to see a time when Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all change signs within a few years. And so the tenor of 2024 is really like, we're no longer in the past, we're definitely on the move, but we're not yet able to tell where we're going. And I think that's really the biggest key about this year, is like it's sailing around Cape Horn, around Tierra del Fuego. You can't take your sighting on where you're going until you get around the bend. And we're going, but we're not quite around the bend yet, so it's too early to tell.
Thank you. Okay, great. Yes.
I agree with Rick 100%. Okay, so
That's rare that anyone.
A couple of things really stand out to me, but the one that stands out that's coming up pretty quick is Chiron conjunct the North Node in Aries. And so we have
Conjunct my son.
yeah, all this Aries energy happening. And so I went back and looked it up, and it was in 1969, the last time Chiron was conjunct the North Node in Aries, February 14th, and it was around 0 degrees Aries. So if I went back further, it was 1633 when they came together. And what was interesting about that time is it's when Galileo was put before the legal justice system of the day, I guess, and because he had the audacity to say that the Earth went around the sun, not the other way around, and he wound up being convicted, and they were going to put him in prison, and he recanted his position on that. So I'm like, here's Chiron. If we think of Chiron as the shamanic healer, what is it that we're healing? What are the wounds of injustice that have been with us for such a long time? And back in 1633, it was February 20th, and now it's February 19th. And they were also at very close same degrees, because this one's almost 17 degrees, and that one was like almost 19 degrees all those years, 391 years ago. So there's a lot going on with all of that, and I feel like it's definitely worth our time and attention to look at how are we moving forward, healing the wounds of the past so that they aren't keeping us from going forward in the best way possible.
Although Galileo was put under house arrest, and although he did recant, under his breath he said, but it does move. True.
Before we go on, how many of you are familiar with your birth sign? Oh, good. Okay, so we have a pretty educated group here. All right, I didn't, because let's face it, there's a lot of jargon that tends to happen in astrology, and if you're just beginning, just have patience. It'll start to come together for you. All these, in this degree, conjuncting this, and all of this stuff. It will come together, and you'll get to ask questions at the end if you like. Okay, thank you. David.
Well, when I was on this panel in 2020, I said it was an anomaly year. It's no irony tonight, or today, is the Super Bowl in Vegas, and 2024 feels like Vegas, but with the wah, 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 when you leave the casino, and you're all excited to get into it, and then you were leaving kind of like, oh, it's not fully going the way we want, because as Rick was saying, like, it really is one of those years when you look at the chart, there's a lot of emphasis, I think, about Pluto ingressing into Aquarius, because it did last year. And now here it is again, and then it's going to come back into Capricorn, and I'm looking at, there's a lot that has to come to a conflict with Mars that's going to retrograde in Leo at the end of this year, and we're going to see just tomorrow Mars and Pluto conjunct for the first time in Aquarius in our life. We just saw Mercury Pluto the day that King Charles III came out and like, oh, he's got Cancer. So obviously there's some weird stuff that's going on, and we're all going through transits we've never been before. And that's something we've been doing for the last 4 years very heavily, like really connected to history, connected to the most potent times, but they're all time wave zero into this time. And so the frustration of Saturn and Neptune and Pisces, they're not going to meet in Pisces. It's sloppy. So everybody needs to realize last year, 2023, was retrograde city. Every planet retrograded. This year, well, we're lucky we don't have Venus to retrograde. But the hard part with Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces, and this Pluto Aquarius, it feels like we're going forward, but there's so much that's just like a room that's getting sloppier, a room that's getting more tired, and we can't give up. We're going to have to learn to really help each other through this year. And Jupiter and Uranus is in Taurus. To me, it's like we have so many different values as a culture, as people, and how are we going to find a way for those things to get together? And a lot of that takes within your own self, about that's what Taurus is about, knowing that self-worth within, knowing your skill sets, and you can't push those things off anymore. But at the same time, we have to have that compassion of like, hey, I know you're great at this, but you also probably got stacked up this and this and this. So the stacking up right now that's happening to everybody in their lives and this collective around the world and in every country and in every society and every culture it's a lot. So there's a breaking point, and 2024 feels like the cracks becoming, oh my gosh, but as Rick was saying too, like to me, it's 2025 and 2026 is those cracks that we're going to see break. And so this is a year to not get too overhyped that you're going to win the lottery in Las Vegas energetically and get really upset because it doesn't happen exactly that way. Although there's beautiful things that are going to happen, but I think we're all tired and we're getting a little bit of breaks here and there, but we have to remember that after Jupiter Uranus in April and after this total solar eclipse on top of Chiron, the rest of this year kind of goes back to that. And so we got to use this time, these next couple of months, the best that we can, because that Mars retrograde that's going to be in Leo, we'll probably talk more about that later, that ingresses back into Cancer, and that's all going to be while we're seeing Pluto that will be, of course, ingress back into Capricorn retrograde, and then it's going to come back into Aquarius. We're going to come into 2025 with a Mars in Leo that'll be direct to oppose Pluto to start 2025. And if you've seen how many events have happened at 0 Aquarius, just even tomorrow, Mars, Pluto for the first time in our lives, 0 Aquarius, Jupiter, Saturn. There's so much connected to this 0 Aquarius pattern that's been going on, and it continues even with the retrograde of Mars, which this one's gonna have we've been going through, the last two were pretty good. 2020 was awesome in Aries, and even in 2022 into 3 with this Mars and Gemini retrograde was pretty cool. We hadn't seen it for almost 70 years since Mars had gone through Gemini completely. But this is where it changes signs. It goes into Cancer, its fall position. So this is us being prepared again, but also being positive at the same time, but knowing that it's okay that you have cracks. It's okay if the room's getting sloppy. It's okay if it's not going, and it's not going to all fit together. And that's okay. We're going to have to find ways to help each other. So.
All right, yes. And that Mars retrograde, that's later that doesn't happen until like November,
December, you see the station.
Okay, so, all right, we'll be looking at that. Rachel. Raquel. Oh, Rachel is actually what I was thinking. I was looking at Raquel. That's confusing having you both on this side. Okay.
So which one?
Rachel. I know. Raquel, Rachel.
Thank you. Well, so just to piggyback on what everyone else talked about, I think this year is one of those transitional years, and what's happening over the course of this decade and really over the next 3 years is that we're moving from the outer planets being in water and earth signs, which if you think about water and earth, what do they make? They make mud, they make the structural building materials, and we're moving into air and fire. And when you think about air and fire, we're talking about lightning bolts, we're talking about electricity, hurricanes, that kind of fast movement. And, I think the move to Pluto in an air sign, and then Uranus is going to be entering Gemini in 2025, 2026. As Rick talked about, Neptune and Saturn moving into Aries. This year is pivotal in terms of how we are focusing our thoughts. We are really moving into, to use one of those new age terms, into a 5th dimensional reality, where we are setting our vision. Aquarius is visioning, it's expanding our mind. When you look historically at what happens when Pluto's in Aquarius, it's like mind-blowing inventions and innovations and discoveries, and that's what we're moving into. But we have to be using our mind right now, gathering and visioning circles, doing it in our own vision and spiritual practices and meditations to be setting the path for where we're going as a culture, because I think it could go in the direction of the North Node in Aries this year is really setting a tone for where we could be going. And Aries relates to protecting our boundaries, it relates to war, conflict. And if you look historically at times when Pluto has been in Aquarius, you really see this theme of the difference between colonization and building communities and building coalitions. And so there is this polarity that exists within the sign of Aquarius that we're seeing play out right now. So I do think the North Node in Aries is one of those significant transits this year.
And I think the eclipses, especially that April 8th eclipse, which is going right over the United States, we are in the path. We're on the precipice of the U.S. Pluto return, and it's really interesting in this country how the election, our presidential election, takes place when Pluto is moving back into Capricorn, and the inauguration takes place when Pluto's in Aquarius. So we're fully in that new cycle, and so I think there's going to be some kind of curveball that shows us that we cannot enter into the future, into this air economy, this air phase, with the same mindset and the same structural foundations that we've been living in for the last 248 years. So the one transit, and I'll summarize, I think the one transit that really leads us into this visioning is the Jupiter-Uranus transit at 21 to 22 Taurus, and that's happening on April 20th. And I think this is, to David's point, this is the I'm going to win the lottery transit. I actually did a really significant research study on lottery winners and jackpot winners, and Jupiter and Uranus are usually in the mix in those charts. And so I think that this can fill us with a sense of hope for what's possible, but we have to follow that hope and that vision with real dedicated action and practical steps. And so those are some of my thoughts about this year.
Thank you very much.
That was great. And I feel like every sentence I want to follow that. Hope. So, it said that Jupiter put hope in the bottom of Pandora's box. Yeah? Underneath all the scary stuff. And that tells you a little something about the incarnational experience. And maybe something about what's coming up. So I agree with Rachel that a curveball. But if you've played some baseball, you don't have to swing at every curveball. Sometimes they're just trash, and they're trying to get you to swing at nonsense. And you might see a little bit of that, and I appreciate watching we the people not swing at all the bad balls anymore. There's a lot of that happening. So Rachel mentioned, for example, the polarity, and importantly, the polarity with Aquarius is Leo, right? They're two sides of one thing. That one thing could be described as love. But it can be described in many ways. And I think a beautiful welcoming for Pluto and Aquarius is power to the people. But typically power to the people will be the response to the powerful trying to control the people. Yeah. And so keeping our eyes on that. Rachel mentioned that the eclipse coming on April 8th, the Aries total solar eclipse, will be seen here in the United States. You'll remember we had one in Leo in 2017 in August. But just the last eclipse, solar eclipse in October of 2023 was also visible here in the States. It was an annular eclipse, a ring of fire eclipse, the moon a little too far from Earth to occult the entire sun disk. And that eclipse path and the one coming up literally make an X on Texas. So Aries, which can be conflict and can be war, but it can also be initiation, imperative, breaking away from, individuation. I mean, I think you'll see some of those themes playing out in the world stage, yeah. The question is, how can they play out inside? What do we want to do about that? And I think when we want to balance Aquarius, like, walking around this place, it's very Aquarian, right? And I'm sure many of you are sensitives, and it can be a lot, right? With so many consciousness and more spirit guides than most beings carry around with them. And so, how do you stay sovereign in your own unique self? So this is like a very important training ground for the wider world and in the times now, right? Who are you in this mix? And how can you contribute? Because I love how David ended, sorry, the Leo King ended, with, we're going to have to help each other out. I mean, that's the Aquarius calling card. Now, importantly, the Sun and Pluto conjoined in Capricorn, so we are in the final Pluto Capricorn cycle of our life. Next year, they will start their Aquarian go. Mercury's doing his dances in the Earth signs predominantly this year. And as Rachel mentioned, this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, which, you know, I do also feel is quite hopeful. I think I'll circle back to that when I get to share the mic again. But I'm hoping that some of the Earth technologies and like the biomimicries that have been building up are really going to get launched with this Jupiter-Uranus thing, which is on 420, bro.
Beautiful. Thank you, Danielle. Great. And Raquel.
Okay. Oh, good, it's working. So the good news is that we are complete with phase one. Phase one was 2020 to 2023. So that's the good news. Now we're opening up a new chapter. And so 2024 to 2027 really is the second phase of the transition. There are stages. We don't skip steps. We can't jump from one to the next. We have to go through the process. So phase two is very important because phase two is where we start to finally see the first few signs of what could be on the other side. So this is the first year. And as Rick and others have rightfully mentioned, 2025 and 2026 really are when we're going to start to see the physical manifestations of this second stage. But it begins now. It begins this year. So I'm really excited. And those of us that see that and that know that, we can reach deep inside ourselves for what is our new vision for this new stage that we're entering. And we have support for that. As a matter of fact, I've been saying that May and June are the golden months of 2024. Because this is where we really get to start to feel into and see that fresh new energy, the air signs, especially Aquarius and Gemini coming into the picture. And it's exciting. It's exciting. So, yes, the rest of the year we have a lot of other intense alignments happening, and that is to prepare us for 2025 so we can really start to push through. So the eclipses are speaking of that, and there is an emphasis as well, in my perspective, on the culmination of Pisces and Taurus. Now this is very important because we have been slowly coming to this point for many, many years with Neptune and Pisces and Uranus in Taurus. So all of our Pisces and Taurus houses are in a stage of culmination right now. This whole year, it's all about that. And that's what the lunar eclipse in Pisces is, and Neptune at 29 degrees. It's speaking of this culmination. So we have to take into consideration that while we are in the very first stage of a new beginning, there's also a lot culminating this year. So really it is that unknown place for all of us, for the world. However, it is the unknown in a new stage. Let's remember that. So the one thing that I mean, I'm the last and everything that everybody says, I'm like, yes, I was going to say that. It's so incredible. But the one thing that I want to bring up here that I feel it's very important to make reference to is that this year we begin the Jupiter and Saturn square. And this is very important because Jupiter and Saturn are the planets that rule society. And so these have to do with societal shifts. And we need this. We need this so Pluto in Aquarius can do its thing. So the Jupiter and Saturn square is also very interesting because this is, in its own way, another culminating point for the original conjunction that we had of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius. So it really is emphasizing that Aquarius energy, the new beginning for society, but now they're in the square, so it's time for action. This is the time for action for the society shifts that we've been calling in and that we're all ready for. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this is going to play out, because people are ready for freedom, right? For autonomy, for independence, and people are ready to find their voice. And this is what this year is going to be about as well. So, yeah, and to have a voice and to be able to, and when I say that, I really mean the authenticity of our voice, not what is told us. Is that how you say told us?
Told to us.
Told to us.
Or taught to us.
See, there you go. Sometimes I forget that English is not my first language. So this is why the North Node is in Aries. It really is helping us find our autonomy, our voice, our independence. Because otherwise, Pluto in Aquarius can't do its thing. So the North Node in Aries is also helping us find that independence and that freedom, because it's also paving the way for Neptune and Saturn in Aries. So the North Node in Aries is paving the way for that. And that's all I'm going to say right now.
Great. Wow.
Shima, may I go last?
You may go last again. The Alpha and the Omega.
The Alpha
yes.
and the Omega. So I didn't say this at the beginning because I thought someone else might bring it up, and I want to make sure it's on the table. I believe the singularly most important aspect of 2024 is the Uranus-Pluto trine.
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't perfect until 2027 and 2028, but it's already in play, and it came up conceptually from a number of people because it's part of what's feeding the hope. And when I use the word hope, I know Brett talked about, hope as the bottom of Pandora's box. I have Buddhist friends who refer to what they call the tyranny of hope, because hope keeps us out of the present moment and, be here now, right? But when we hope, sometimes we use hope as a form of inaction. And because we think, I hope it's going to get better. And so there's something about this Uranus-Pluto trine. Remember, what's going on now, I'll talk a lot more about this on my post-conference, but the Uranus-Pluto trine is actually the smooth movement between those things that were seeded in the 1960s at the Uranus-Pluto conjunction that came back through conflict in the 2010s at the Uranus-Pluto square. And this is something that I think is going to be very profound, and it's sitting quietly behind everything right now, but they're already, kind of within a orb already. But it's not going to be until Uranus moves into Gemini that it's going to explode. And I think that in some ways, where if you melt copper, which is malleable and doesn't hold its shape, it's not functional for war. It's Venus, copper. And if you melt copper with tin, which is Jupiter, related to Jupiter, it's brittle. It's not very functional by itself. But if you melt the two of them together, and then when they harden, they create the alloy of bronze, which created an age. It's strength. It has power and strength. And I think what's going to happen is that the alloy is beginning to cool, and by the time we reach that trine period of 20, even 26, but 26, 27, 28, it's like whatever we are doing or not doing now is going to solidify, and there's not everyone's going to be happy. Matter of fact, everyone's going to be not happy about something, because there's so many issues that are bifurcating us that we're going to find that there's less room for conflict and discussion, and yet I really think things are going to solidify. Enough, I can go on about that, but I just wanted to put that on the table.
Great. So when you're saying trine, it's because...
Trines are a flow of energy. It's like superconductivity. It's like flow, and flow sounds great, but without conflict, without interaction, there's no progression. And so in a way, trines can be very problematic from a standpoint of development. And so when you look at a chart and you have a trine, well, that's great because the energy just flows. But if the energy between innovation and revolution and shock and awe of an electrical, sudden change of Uranus and the deepest transformations, if that energy is flowing rather than in dynamic conflict, there's not a lot of room for arguing with what's happening. So I think things are going to solidify gradually as we move through this decade.
Wow, yeah. So, yes. So, several of you have spoken about, 25, 26, 27, and let's just explain that a little bit more of why we're talking about those years instead of this year, instead of 20.
I think it's been said, this year is a transition point. It's
Right,
got-
but what is happening in those years
Yeah,
to make
and
it?
I am going to add that the outer planets are changing signs, and nothing can really happen until we wrap up the old, right? So Pisces, that culminating point, Pisces and Taurus, we are going to see a lot of events personally and globally as well culminating. And so after they enter the new signs, it might not even be in the first or second year because they take a while to warm up. But we need to wait for the new energies to come in astrologically for us to be in that new field.
It's kind of fascinating that the nodes are going back into Pisces, and Saturn and Jupiter, and then Saturn and Neptune are going into Aries. So what do you think about that? I mean, what is that all about? Our evolution and our...
That's what they're going to be all meeting up at the end of Pisces.
Yeah.
At the out of 24. That's what, if you start looking at it, I think there's a bitter pill to swallow for every single soul here. Like, even if we're talking about whether it's politically or in your own life, we're looking in the biggest mirror as a society, as a culture, as our individuality. And we got to bite these, as it was said, like, stop swinging at these crazy curveballs that we all have fallen to. We all have to look in the mirror and be like, we all swing. Anybody who's in here being like, I didn't swing at a crazy curveball, like, no, you did. It's that bitter taste of like, okay, and the acceptance of it, because that's the only way we're going to be able to get through these really conflicting energies. Because to me, there's just like, the conflict hasn't been close to even being confronted. It's the deniability of the conflict. And everybody trying to say, hopefully, no way. But conflict's only dealt with actually facing it. And conflict doesn't have to be a bad thing. I just think that, the conflict that we're going to be dealing with is love. And instead of like, I hear so much about individuality, but like, like the scary part to me of all this Chiron energy, North Node, total solar eclipse this year is just this like, it's me or, with all these, there's going to be 2 eclipses in Libra. The South Node's in Libra, Jupiter and Uranus meeting in Taurus. Venus is the ruler of Taurus, so guess what? South Node, we're seeing that dispositing energy of Venus. So I feel like, people are going to be so like wanting peace, wanting all this stuff, but really like trying to almost like overdrive to try and feel better in a way. And I think that that's going to be very hard. People are going to make a lot of crazy relationship decisions that they probably are going to regret this year for that Chiron healing idea of I'm going to heal my ego to feel better. When really, to me, it's like, can we be a better guide? To me, Chiron is the great guide. And if we're going to guide, it's like, it's okay that my ego swing at some stupid things in my life. And let me be a good, solid person that's there and is willing to, face conflicts and not bring the conflict on to another person anymore, or not bring the conflict into my relationships, not bring the because we're all at that point. Nobody wants to look at it though. And I think to me, like, there's going to be a lot of people, like, if you notice in the astrology community, I'll just say it because nobody's probably going to say this, but like, we've been seeing a lot of people, like I predicted years ago on here, jump ship, and now they're doing TikToks. I'm Christian now. I quit astrology. That's the weird part with Saturn and Neptune. It like feels in Pisces as if something's going to happen there, but they don't meet there at all. And it's like weird because it's almost like people are going to start saying, like right now at the Super Bowl, Jesus is like the #1 commercial. And I'm like, oh, okay. Right? So people are going for this and they don't even meet there. And it's like the biggest waffle ball of all time. And then, nope, sorry, there was no guy that came out of the sky that you thought. And I think that that's the scary part to some people right now. Like, I think psychological and mental health are going to be massive things to pay attention to with all these outer planets moving in all those Pisces. And that the religious faction is really the structure that's falling down. especially with human origin stuff. But we can go on with that one later. We'll put it on
And
right.
so we're talking about Neptune in its ruling planet, in its ruling
Yes.
sign, in Pisces at 29 degrees for the pretty much the year it's going to be in, right? So seems like it's going to get really crazy, right? And this person knows I'm actually doing this right now. So
It's me calling you.
what's that?
It's me calling
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. All right. So, Rachel, you want to touch on that?
I wanted to touch on that too, on actually 2 points that David mentioned. So I'll start with just Neptune at the 29th degree.
Yeah.
So whenever a planet is at the 29th degree, and especially when it stations, Neptune is going to be stationing at 29, 25 this year. And when a planet's at that 29th degree, it's like caught in like suspended motion, suspended animation. It's not going forward, it's not going back, and it's literally going to be there. One thing, and so I think that those themes that you were just talking about with religion and really what is spirituality and how are we all connected, and I think that is going to be something that is that is really up for us in the way that we can see the ways that religion, so to bring in that analogy of the cracks in the pavement, we're going to be able to see how religion has actually been one of the instigators of creating the fractures in society and in our social structures. I think Pluto in Capricorn has really brought some of that to the surface with the the abuse scandals and horrific experience, that whole thing in the Catholic Church. I'm trying to say it in a way that doesn't trigger anybody, and in other religious sectors as well. And so I think that's something that's going to be really prevalent. The other thing too is that Pisces is the sign of. I think of it as the sign of the Buddhist concept of non-attachment and that mystical experience where we see that we're one. And one thing that when we tie in that concept with this whole conversation about individual freedom and freedom in general, I think a lot of people talk about freedom and peace from a perspective of privilege. And what Pluto in Aquarius is offering us is this opportunity to really understand what freedom is, and to see that my own individual freedom and my own rights and my own autonomy, that there's energetically, it's not pure if I have those rights and those privileges at the expense of other people. And so I think Neptune in Pisces and then Saturn in Pisces is really helping us to pick that apart and to think about this framework of all the frameworks of our social structures in a way that really asks us to take a hard look and not just take what we have for granted.
Great. Gemini?
I got to resurface after that one. Coming back up. And actually, I also can't get past Rick's alchemy description before of tin and copper. And I was like, where in the heavens is this coming from? But I realized Jupiter, tin, Venus' sign, Taurus, so Jupiter and Taurus, right? And actually, Venus and Jupiter will meet in late May there in Taurus, just before Jupiter follows Venus over the wall into that Gemini sign. So whenever I hear bronze, I remember that I have to own a very old saxophone because they used all the good bronze on weapons of war. And so here's
Is your
the question.
saxophone bronze or brass? Because with brass they use a zinc instead of tin.
My bad, it is brass. But let's just keep let's keep the Jupiter in there anyway. This is why you don't sit up here with Rick. He knows everything. But I still pose the question to you: will it be bombs or saxophones? So let's make art.
It's still copper. It's still copper, and that's what's important, though.
There's for me, I've really been invoking the need for like human creativity in art, and how I'm seeing in some of the stress of this time that very clearly pronounced in the chart. So Venus is currently in a Leo Gemini cycle. It's a very playful, creative signs. This Jupiter and Taurus thing, right? And Jupiter meeting Uranus there to really electrify our creativity and the ability to embody it and actually make stuff, and let's do it together. I think Uranus can encourage that. Raquel mentioned the coming Jupiter-Saturn squares is a very important kind of sprouting of the seed that happened at December solstice 2020 when Jupiter and Saturn conjoined in Aquarius, right? So what was that thing about? And as Raquel said, there will likely be some tensions, some conflicts. Sprouting ain't easy. You got to get through the soil, and then it's the winds and the rains, but the wind bends the plant to help it grow strong, we say, But before that time, we're in this midst of Jupiter and Saturn in 3 quintiles, which is an incredibly creative and artistic aspect. So an interesting thing I've been watching is how, though, what's been said about AI for decades, or into my ears anyway, is like, oh yeah, it'll be able to do this and that, but it can never write a poem, right? It could never paint. And it feels to me like that's what the AI has been wanting to learn first, right? It's like, hey, let's give you guys a bunch of art tools and see how you do art, right? Because there's something so soulful in that. So I think it's really important because there is like this independence and sovereignty that doesn't have to be like completely lost ego thing in Aries of like, who are you in all of this, right? So who are you as you come into the group, really knowing who you are, filling yourself with you, not so you separate yourself from the group, but so you can merge but not get lost. You know what I mean? It's like the calling of the time. All right, so has this been forever?
Oh, you're good.
All right, I want to say another thing, please.
It feels like that. I know sometimes when you're speaking, yes.
I never know.
Yes.
So Aries and the North Node being there, there's a really important astronomical happening. I'm just wondering by show of hands, has anybody noticed over the past months the moon rising or setting in a really weird place, like seemingly impossible? Has anybody seen the moon like really high, like higher than you could imagine, or really, really low? All right, yeah, so this is called a lunar standstill cycle, and it's an 18.5-year thing, really 18.618 years, but who's counting? We are, and the ancients did, okay? So as the North Node moves to the 0 point in Aries, and that happens in January of 2025, we have this amazing happening where the moon goes to places the sun could only dream to go. This is called the out of bounds moon, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. And there's many ancient sites known, and I think many unknown, like I found a few, that honor these risings and settings of these extreme moons. Callanish in Scotland is one that's very important to my first teacher, Daniel Jamario. Chimney Rock here in Colorado, the Newark Earthworks in Ohio, to name a few. There's something very powerful in this. There's something about the teachings of soul and spirit, how they are same and not. And very importantly, there's, I would say, a much larger cycle, which is a 26,000-year cycle. And you'll hear this as the precession of the equinoxes, taking us through the astrological ages and much more. But very importantly, we are in a time now where the pole of Earth, the north and south poles of Earth, are pointing to the Milky Way. They won't do it like this again for 26,000 years. Santa's place, the North Pole is leaning towards Orion's club. The South Pole is leaning towards galactic center, where the stinger of the scorpion and the arrow of the archer and the foot of Ophiuchus triangulate this powerful place. Andrew Collins in the talk yesterday was saying that Rupert Sheldrake said that this is like the super consciousness of our galaxy, which is amazing, right? This, for me, is the largest framework. This is what I started tripping on in the stars before I came to astrology, thanks to the work of now the late, great John Major Jenkins. His book, Galactic Alignment, I feel is something every mystic of our age should read. It's probably the very fuel for the great awakening that's happening now. or the aweirdening, as I prefer to call it. And there's two things I'll say about it. So one, what the moon does every 18.6 years, combined with this 26,000 year galactic alignment thing, it arranges for the moon every month this year and next year to pass between Earth and the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Right? And so this will happen in 18 and a half years from now, 18 and a half years from then, probably kind of for like another 500 years, but then it won't happen again for like 25,000 years. If what we know about astronomy now is right, and who knows that we know anything correct, right? But it's a big deal. So I would just want to encourage you to like practice with this, because every month when the moon moves into late Sagittarius or early Capricorn, and I'm talking about the tropical zodiac, Tropic of Capricorn, okay? It's literally between you and galactic center. You won't see the galactic center at that time because some of you live in light pollution like I do, and because the moon will drink a lot of the sky. But it's happening. And so know that the moon, who's like closest to us and speaks to home and speaks to nurturing, is aligned with the heart of our galaxy. And some suggest, and I believe it, that we're not from the Milky Way, but this is the new galaxy. This is our new home. So there's something, I mean, it's hard to describe this in words. All I can say is it's a really big deal. And I encourage you for the late Sagittarius and Capricorn moons this year and all of next year to just go to that moon, to know that behind that moon is the galactic center, like the home of our new home. It's like super consciousness, this kind of great mother energy. And just open your heart. And yeah, whatever you want to call it, prayer, intention, etc. And I think for like our whole fam, I mean like all of Earth. There's one last thing I want to say is this about Aries, is it's tricky, you know, like we were talking about Pluto and Aquarius, like Pluto's not something you can see with your eyes. And it's hard to like stay alert and awake, you know. I mean, look at in May what the World Health Organization is trying to get through in May. I'm sure many of you are tuned into that, right? And many people are not. So what do you do when you go home for the holidays and you're hanging out with normal folk, right? And I think it's really important to remember it's not the job of the awakening one to shake the sleeper awake. Keep the fire lit so that they can rest peacefully. For if they can awaken at their own pace, they will awaken with the dream intact. Nobody wants to wake up to an alarm clock, but if your eyes are open, keep the fire lit.
Great.
It's a very important time.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Dana. Caitlin, did you have something you wanted to add to that? I thought you might.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on what Brett was saying, because this lunar standstill time, this year, on the June solstice, we have a full moon in Capricorn. It also begins a true blue moon cycle. So many people think that a blue moon is when you have two full moons in the same month. That's not what a blue moon is. When you have 4 full moons in a season, from a solstice to an equinox or an equinox to a solstice, also that means you'll also have 2 full moons in the same sign. So the June solstice, early Capricorn, and then in July 21st is another full moon around 29 Capricorn. And these are the things that let us know that it's actually a true blue moon, because it only happens about every 3.5 years. And it happens to also be happening that the moon will be out of bounds and at its most extreme, and places that, like what Brett was mentioning in Scotland, this is when the moon is said to be walking the land. So it rises up, it doesn't go very high, it just kind of skims across the horizon before it sets, and there's a standing stone circle they built at least 5,000 years ago, probably longer. That's just what they think it is right now. And they were tracking this lunar standstill. And they were also, the mountain that's in the distance there is the old woman of the Moors. They also called her Kalia, the grandmother, or Sleeping Beauty. And so the moon is traveling along, Sleeping Beauty or the grandmother, and they had a saying that said, when the moon walks the land at the calling of the cuckoo, the shining ones will return, or the great shining ones will return. And so this is the year that that's happening at the solstice. So we have a major event with the sun on the galactic cross at the galactic edge, and then the moon on the galactic cross at the galactic center, that full moon, activating both of those crosses in the sky at the June solstice this year. And it'll be an extreme out of bounds. In fact, I think it's one of the most extreme out of bounds full moons or new moons that we're going to have in this 19-year lunar standstill time. So I'm feeling like it's an opportunity for us to be very aware. The moon's a transmitter. It's transmitting insights, information to us from the galactic center, and also the sun then transmitting from the galactic edge. So if we're open, if we're paying attention, if we're tuned in, what is the messages that are coming through? What is it that is ours to do in relationship to this time, and how do we work with it in a ceremonial, magical way? So that's what I have.
Great. And out, yeah, thank you, Carmen. And out of bounds, if the moon is out of bounds, how does that affect the person?
So the sun rises either due east or rises due east and due west at the equinoxes. At the solstices, it's either furthest north or furthest south. And it can only go 23.5 degrees north or south. The moon can go outside of that. So it's considered to be outside the boundaries of our everyday reality. So we can go and access things that are outside of our more fixed and limited reality.
Great. All right. So it's quite a year. I mean, with all these 29 degrees, the anaretic degree, and all these 0 world points, all the endings and beginnings of so many cycles, it's like we chose to come at a really remarkable time.
We're the great shining ones. We're returning, we're waking up, we're remembering. That's what it's about.
And that means there's no full moon in Cancer this year, right? So that's the trade-off of those dual full moons in Capricorn. So it's not, there's no extra comfiness. But I think it's interesting too that if I look at it from a solar position, we're going to see Jupiter ingress into Gemini this year. We're going to see the squares of Saturn, like Raquel brought up, which I think that's going to be a really intense transit, especially immutable. We were so used to the fixed cycle over these last couple decades. But the Sun and Jupiter will not meet in Gemini at all. It's a miss. They're going to meet in Taurus, then next year in Cancer. And I've been going, okay. Now, Jupiter's detriment, of course, in Gemini, so maybe that's a good thing. But at the same time, because if I look at this Gemini and Sag axis, and we're talking about this galactic axis, and I'm like, well, maybe Jupiter's like, yeah, I'd rather meet, down in Sag, where I'm happy down there. But it's interesting to me to think about this quest of truth, this understanding of truth that we're all looking to find. We already saw the North Node transit of 2020 into 2021 there, and that really didn't go too well when it came to truth. A lot of lies. So it makes me wonder, like, what are we really going to be on a quest for truth if the Sun and Jupiter won't meet there? The last time they met was June 19th, 2013, and it's not going to be until another 12 years past this, into the 2030s. And I'm like, that's why I made the Leo King June 19th, 2013.
To piggyback here on this truth, very interesting, and also what Rachel was bringing up about the whole energy in Pisces. Our truth is shifting. That's why we're in this place of the unknown. And also, this is the storyline between Pisces and Aries, and the North Node in Aries shifting into Pisces, Neptune and Saturn in Pisces shifting into Aries. We're in that transition of truth. So when we're looking at Pisces, which is where Neptune is wrapping up its storyline there, we're really looking at a base here for specifically religion and spirituality. And this is very interesting to me because to me it's speaking about the transition from the age of Pisces to Aquarius. Now they're very different energies, very different signs, and you know, in order for us to step into Aquarius, we really need to exercise our own voice, our own independent thinking, and our voice, our truth from that place. So Neptune ending its journey in Pisces, together with Saturn there, I spoke about this last year, is very much about taking off the rose-colored glasses. And this is where we're going to be seeing a shift in religion and spirituality. This is very important because out of religion and spirituality, we create our beliefs, okay? And this is a foundational piece for society. Everything is built upon beliefs. So without this component, we can't step into the new reality. We can't step into the new shifts that are coming. So even your question, Shima, in regard to this interesting transition from, right, part of them are going into Aries and the North Node is moving into Pisces. It's really speaking about the new beginning of spirituality and what that means for us. Because we're seeing now that we don't need anymore a God or, right, a superior, an outside force to show us or to guide us or to tell us. This is really about us owning that truth, owning that power, taking full responsibility for our creations. So we're wrapping up Pisces. This is also the wrapping up of the Piscean age and all the evolution that came along with it for these last 2,000 years. And getting ready to really move into this new stage of Aquarius, that authentic voice. So this is why the North Node is now in Aries, preparing us for that, really giving us that, the vision and the initiative to step into that, so that when it moves back into Pisces, we can then start to recreate our truth, recreate our belief systems, our vision of spirituality and so forth. So it's very beautiful because we get to just relax into the process and relax into the fact that things aren't working anymore the way that they used to. You know, all of our truths are shifting, including mine. So the North Node moving into Pisces next year and so forth is just the beginning of, okay, now what is your spirituality? What is your truth? And of course, at the same time, we see Neptune, who rules Pisces. So Neptune is very key when it comes to our belief systems that are based in spirituality and even religion. And it's moving into Aries. It's going to be a completely new phase for that. Completely new phase for spirituality. And this is where we are going to receive the support to now think for ourselves and find our truth from that place.
Great, thank you. Rachel, yes. No, you went.
I just love this so much, and I wanted to weave these two topics of conversation together. One being the Galactic Center, and the other being this understanding of truth. So at the Galactic Center is a great big black hole, and black holes basically take their gateways, their wormholes to other galaxies. It's theorized. And so if we think about that metaphorically, black holes offer us truth, information, truth with a capital T, that's beyond what we can know with our own limited perspective, or what we can know in our own cultural atmosphere and field. And so I think there's a real opportunity for us to be open to new ways of receiving guidance and to new energies, new spiritual energies that are available to help us and guide us. And so I just wanted to add that in as well.
Thank you, yes.
Shima, quick comment.
Yes.
In reference to the age of Aquarius and Pluto moving into Aquarius, and there's a lot of talk about that, and I'm kind of stacking this onto what Raquel just said. I just want to point out that Pluto moving into Aquarius is not the age of Aquarius. They're two very separate and different things, and there's a lot of kind of rounding off of ages being 2,000 years. They're not 2,000 years. They're 72 degrees, they're 1 degree every 72 years, which is 2,160 years. Now, no one knows where the exact cusp, which is just Latin for edge, where the cusp between two ages are, because they're so long. However, it's likely that the age of Pisces, the age of the fish, the age of Christianity, if you want to call it that, it's likely that it began at the beginning of our counting of our calendar, give or take a year or 5 or 10 or 20 or 30, I don't know.
100.
But, huh?
Or 100.
But, yeah, well, that kind of stretches it because we look in astrology for dates of significance. And regardless of what religion you might adhere to, if you adhere to any, the fact is that the Western colonization of the world under the guise of white supremacy, European dominance, colonialism, whatever you want to call it, was a predominant factor since the birth of Jesus, give or take a bunch of years, which puts the beginning of the age of Aquarius around the year 2160. It's about a century away, even given a shift of 20 or 30 or 40 years. However, these shifts, the cusps between these ages are very gradual, and even Pluto's movement through Aquarius for the next couple of decades are going to be like foreshadowing of what's around the bend, but we're still looking at another very large bend.
I agree. It's not, in my opinion, it's not until Pluto is once again in Aquarius
exactly.
that we're really going to be in the age of Aquarius.
Agreed. Which is 250 years down the road.
Karen, did you have something?
Oh, well, I think when it comes to that idea of the Piscean, because, you know, what we're seeing now in the Middle East, it's like, you know, you can call it the white thing, but, you know, you see what happened in what's Jerusalem today and what's happened from Middle Eastern Saladin and what he did to the white people, I guess you call them that. Like, this whole white and black thing has to end. We're all one.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's the whole, like, whole prop of that Pisces has brought is like the idols that these religions say to not serve, I guess you could say, right? Like, don't follow the false idols, but all these people have been following these false idols for thousands of years. And that's where it's like, I think it'll be difficult because I don't think a lot of people here it's gonna be difficult, right? It's like, how are we gonna hold our family and our friends? That, to me, it feels like, you know, it's like gonna be a panic attack. Like, when with Pluto and Aquarius, to me, it's like the discoveries of like, oh, what's the origins of humanity? And even this North Node Chiron conjunction with a total solar eclipse, Chiron to me is the key that unlocks our humanity, that we're in this universe between the Uranian world and the Saturn world, right? And we're gonna see in the 2040s when Chiron and Uranus, Chiron actually in its orbit just goes a little bit farther than Uranus. It can see farther. And I feel that key to unlock is gonna be the great wound that, you know, we feel like we understand what's out there, and then we feel like, well, we get what's here, but we actually don't know what's here, and we actually don't know what's there. But, we, you know, and like, that's the conundrum of this reality. But I feel like, you know, people, when they start seeing all these discoveries, the scrolls they just found recently, I think it was Julius Caesar's father-in-law's closet. They just found 800 scrolls. I don't know if everybody's been seeing that yet, but they're about to reveal those here in the next couple weeks. And it's a bunch of who knows what's out there, or just even like, let's say, they're saying it's one asteroid. They just took all the asteroid dust, right? And they just got it in October, but they didn't know how to open it, so they had to make a new tool in order to open the dust, and they just opened it. Happened to be the same time at Oumuamua. I think they went there instead, but that's a conspiracy. But I feel, how are we gonna hold people as it's like a panic attack, because it's like I was conditioned through so many genealogy lines of my own family, my friends, to believe this, and if I don't, I'm gonna be, you know, not accepted in our wide community of people, and so that's where I think the Aquarian energies, like, honestly, are saving grace in a positive way about we're all different. We all have ways we can be family and come together. you know, and that's going to be our great guide through this. And it's going to be so much lighter, I feel, than the Capricorn. I think we're all going to have our own wake up of like, oh my God, that was heavy. This 16 years has been heavy. And you know, and that goes really deep. And I think that we're all over the systems.
David, worse than being excluded by your family, it's eternal damnation.
Yeah, that's yeah, and
That's a big one.
I know, yeah, and hanging out with a guy with some red horns, I guess, that has a fire going, and
Exactly. So, I'm wondering, we have all these planets going into Aquarius. I mean, right now I know it's a stellium, so it's not the big thing, but there's Pluto going into Aquarius. And just a lot of the things that I've come across talks about between the technological advances and stuff that we are going to be so shifted.
Yeah, it's ET and AI.
What is that?
The initials. It's ET and AI.
Yeah, right.
That's it.
It's good because it's like, we think as much as we can think with what we know, but when something comes along and shifts us into the next space, and we can't go to that space until we're ready to go to that space, and everything that we're talking about sounds so much like it's such a setup. It's like this huge ending and beginning. It's just really so amazing. But one of the things I was thinking about, for like the baby boomer generation, and a lot, because here at Conscious Life, there's the baby boomers, the millennials. It's really been wonderful how all the generations have come together. I just love it. But I know that for some of, with all these planets in Aquarius, means that they're going to be opposing a lot of people with like
Pluto
say
and Leo.
Pluto and Leo,
But
Saturn and Leo.
Benjamin Franklin was that. So
What's that?
Benjamin Franklin was a Pluto Leo, and he was like the only cool one. His own son was a royalist, and was like a loyalist, and was like, "No, Dad, don't do it." But only Benjamin Franklin would do it, right? So like, there's only a few couple cool Pluto Leos that are willing to rebel against the crazy
Yeah,
crap.
it's Shima and me.
Oh, and Kaylin, sorry. And then all the Pluto Scorpios are about to have their Pluto squares, where like that's what's interesting to me is like we call millennials, but it used to be Gen Y. Okay, they got rid of that. But like I'm a Pluto Libra, right? So it's like what? Like you throw me as a millennial? Pluto Libra and Pluto Scorpios are way different.
Say that again.
Pluto Libras, right?
Right.
Very short, small generation, is different than Pluto and Scorpio. And so, that's what's weird is they've lumped these things now together.
Interesting.
But like, if you think about this Pluto ingress into Aquarius, it's like it's going to square, and even the Antasia point of Aquarius is Scorpio, right? Like, so at 0, it's 29 Scorpio right now. And so like, and then it goes backwards that way, or you can look at it however way you want to. It's like that generation right now, if you look at all the history, whether it was when King Henry VIII left the church, and the people that he all dealt with at that time, those Pluto Scorpios, the one that didn't go along, my head cut off. Or if you look at the Revolutionary War too, the Pluto Libra generation, that's Washington, that's Adams, that's like the guys that were like, okay, we're gonna figure this stuff out. But who went in? The Pluto Sages, and that's what I'm afraid of. Where are they all gonna go? The school systems today, the collegiate systems. It's almost like the fate you're talking about. Like, how is this all feeling so set up? Pluto is fate. So when you see just all these things that have happened to Pluto over the last 4 years, it is fate. And where are the Pluto Sag generation going to go? And then what's going to happen to the Pluto Leos that aren't willing to be a Benjamin Franklin and still be laughing and having fun out there? He kept everybody entertained. Everybody was like having parties at Ben Franklin's house. Of course, they found a bunch of skeletons in his London apartment, but whatever, like, hey, he was having a good time.
Yes, well, I think that it's going to be challenging for a lot of Pluto and Leos for sure. But it's good to know that that is coming around. You know what I mean? It's just like, well, we can feel it for sure. So we were talking about, I'm just looking at the time here, and we were talking about the Mars retrograde in Leo back into Cancer. Okay, so what is that all about? To end the year with that, right? It's going to end the year and then start in January. So, does anybody want to tackle that, or is that something that we feel is important to talk about?
I'll say something.
All right,
Just
Kaylin.
that because retrogrades often get a bad rap, and they're not like things aren't easy and they don't get done in the way, or that things don't happen in the way that we planned for them. But here's the thing to know about a retrograde. Any retrograde is when the planet is closest to the Earth, it's brightest if it's visible, and it's in a power phase. Really, it's just we have chosen to look at it as something that's diminished, and so retrogrades are not diminished. So Mars being retrograde is a very powerful time, and especially if we think of Mars being the action-oriented energy and Leo being sovereign, and then the Cancer energy of being taking care of family and taking care of community and taking care of nurturing things. So that's just a little piece I wanted to share about the retrograde, any retrograde, but especially Mars retrograde.
And that's so important. I mean, you have to think of planets like radio stations, and when they get closer to Earth, the radio station is louder. And the problem is that when a radio station gets so loud, excuse me, when a radio station gets so loud, it takes over the radio stations, and so we shut it off. And what happens with retrogrades, the reason why they have a historical bad rap is that when a planet gets loud, it tends to be suppressed or repressed. We can't figure out how to express it. And that's the problem with retrogrades, is that when Mars gets loud, we get so angry, we hold it in until it reaches a boiling point, and then we do something stupid, or, and that's true even with Mercury retrogrades, but you make a really good point. And I think that when any planet goes retrograde, especially coming out of this period of retrogrades in October, November, December, that David talked about earlier, there's nothing unusual. Every outer planet goes retrograde every year. It's only that when they get within a trine of each other, that they all go retrograde at the same time. That's unusual. That's what was powerful about those retrogrades. And they were all so loud that culturally civilization became like paralyzed, because how do you integrate all this loud energy? Well, it's easy. You suppress it, or it's repressed. You shut it down, and that's the danger of retrograde. So thank you for saying that. Important.
I'm gonna have to get you back about the whole zinc thing.
Uh-oh.
Because Mars is not retrograde every year.
Wait, I didn't say. Wait.
No, you said outer planet, but Mars is an exterior planet. Every 700.
No, I said trans-Saturnia. I said planets outside of Saturn.
All right, anyway,
Okay.
so let me just say this is an important thing. Like we do have this incredible experience when we watch the planets in our sky that they appear to stop, and then turn around and move backwards for a time, and it is a head shrink, right? Like so. The flat Earth world is trying to deal with this once again and trying to unpack, some of the ancient maths that didn't work. And from this, heliocentric model of the solar system that kind of came into the room earlier when we were speaking Galileo. We understand like why it goes down now, right? And it almost feels like some of the superstition around retrogrades is linked to a time when people like us, once we were called mathematicians, who like to know the answer to the problem, just couldn't figure this one out. Right? It's like, why is it happening? And I don't know. And there's a lot of angst around that. However, as Kaylin, Rick said, like this is Mars close to Earth. An interesting thing, and I'd have to look deeper into this, and maybe some of you could tell me, but I remember, I think it was in 2018, Mars retrograde was in Aquarius, and that was like a particularly bright Mars in our lifetimes.
Yeah, so the lunar eclipse on it as well.
Yeah, and so like that's a place where Mars and Earth actually get closer, and I would therefore think, and I'd have to look, I think it's actually more like Virgo, but Leo is a place where Mars is further from the sun and further from Earth, and I think that will make this Mars retrograde longer. No, shorter. Either way, Mars is probably the planet that like least like stopping. and going backwards. And like, as what was said earlier, that he'll kind of face across the way at this very invisible Pluto, that Mars will be very close to Earth when Pluto is far from Earth. Like, there's a really intriguing thing there. And it is an opportunity for an action, right? So I'm such a sky guy. Like, I like these beings that I can see, like Mars and Pluto, right? Like, I connect to them through their relationship through the visible planets. And there's something at that time where this Aquarius Pluto thing is really going to get activated and going to come into us. And I don't know if Mars will be helpful in that way. I feel like David probably has a lot to say about that. I want to rewind, though, to something David said, which is, and it's a really cool thing to have seen, that unlike most years, the sun will not conjoin Jupiter while in the sign of Gemini. And David mentioned that Jupiter's in detriment in Gemini, which I feel is kind of a detrimental word. I prefer the medieval term, actually, which was exile.
Yeah.
Because I think we've all experienced that one, you know, of like being a stranger in a strange land. And Gemini is kind of a strange land for Jupiter. And I always think of kind of like the drunken master kung fu style, or like the weird guru, right? Like Uncle Arcturian or whatever, who comes and kind of stirs things up. And I would encourage all of us to be that at this time. I actually kind of feel that it's cool that while Jupiter, of course, will go invisible, so close to the sun in the cave of the sun's beams, but there's something about this kind of like trickster wisdom and like keeping the humor alive that will be so important to like weather it through. I just say, you know, planets in exile, like Muhammad Ali had Mars in Taurus, the greatest fighter that ever was, right? Bob Marley, Venus in Aries. Galileo, Mercury in Pisces. Isaac Newton, Mercury in Sagittarius, right? It doesn't mean these planets don't work, but they work weird. Like Ali's greatest fight ever was choosing to not Vietnam, right? He was fined, he was jailed, he couldn't fight for 3 years of his prime as a result, right? That was the great fight. And all of these people were like game changers and counterculture. And so Jupiter will encourage that in us. I said earlier, like, you know, don't shake the sleeper. That doesn't mean we shouldn't whisper to them in the depths of their dreams. Strange trickster wisdom. And maybe a little link finds their way you know, to their desk at some point or something. You know, I think there's this opportunity to shape shift, to change it up, and to hopefully like keep the levity. A thing that I've loved about being here at Conscious Life Expo, first of all, just like the energy, the amazing people, seeing like different like I guess I'll say heroes of mine, like throughout different like phases of my awakening process, but also just like alternative new views of how we can use the same thing that's been used against us to make this world better. And there's like, I think that's for me that hope that's so alive this year. There is this untouchable, uncageable force called creativity. And I hope that we will all get stranger and inspire other people through us choosing to be ourselves, to be themselves and make a better world.
Yeah.
Mars in Leo, just really quick, Mars in Leo, it retrograde in Leo by the end of the year, to me also is going to be a big push into the next, you know, it's going to be a power move for all of us, globally as well. Let's remember that, as David said, it is going to happen in opposition with Pluto. This is going to be also happening while Jupiter and Saturn are in that square, and ultimately, to me, it's speaking about 2025. It's paving the way for 2025, which is where we're going to see the physical manifestations of, you know, taking action and all that power coming into the next stage. So that's what the Mars in Leo is going to help us with.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's like a collective hernia at the same time as having a hemorrhoid, so.
Thanks for sharing that.
Rachel? Rachel?
Ouch.
Yeah.
So one way that I like to think about retrogrades
is how many of you have read the book The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield? Okay, yeah. So he talks about resistance and how anytime you're getting ready to do something big, write a book, like basically push through your own ceiling of what's comfortable for you, you encounter resistance. And resistance are those, the things that come in as distractions, or those coping mechanisms that we do, like, eating food when you're on a deadline, eating snacks when you're on a deadline, or having to vacuum the whole house when you've got to study for a test. And now that all planets are direct this month and next month, I am noticing that I have no resistance. And sometimes resistance is really helpful because it gives you, it like extends the timeline of something that might seem scary or might seem like out of reach. And when Mars is retrograde in particular, as others have said, it's our drive, it's our ambition, it's our motion forward, and resistance often comes up. Our forms of resistance, our fear manifestations come up from the shadows during retrograde cycles. And if we can see that as a gift, like, okay, I'm not quite ready to be where I am headed, and this is a period to take my time, to really be thoughtful, and to clear up anything that is any of my shadow aspects or the dark crevices of my psyche. It's a time to bring that up out of hiding. It's a time to integrate the shadow aspects within ourselves, and to be really whole as we enter into 2025. So I think there's a real value in ending the year with that retrograde, personally.
Great. And thank you for bringing up that all the planets are direct. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be direct until Mercury goes retrograde? April Fools. All right. Great. So good time, all, right? Whatever.
Just in time for the eclipse.
There we go. Yes, exactly. So let's see. So we're coming to the half of the hour. Let's see if there are any questions in the audience. Yes, do you want to come up and let's give you a mic, okay?
Did Raquel have something that she was going to say?
I did.
Oh,
About what?
Oh, I don't know. You look. I thought. I'm not the moderator. Never mind. Never mind.
Come on up. I don't have a runner, but would you put? Oh, great! Thank you so much.
Somebody.
Mic there.
No, you got one.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Getting it all together. So think about what your questions are. There we go. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks so much for taking my question. It should be a quick one. So I've heard if you are going to buy property or change a job or do any sort of change in relationship, end a relationship, whatever, begin a relationship, do it before around May 26th. And I'm just wondering why.
Caitlin?
I don't know.
I think I could talk a little bit about that.
I just heard, where the source is Astrology Hub. Who brought me here? I came because I heard on Astrology Hub, so just...
Yay, welcome.
But listening to Christopher Renstrom, he mentioned that, and I was just, maybe I need to re-listen to that episode, but if you could talk, anyone could talk on that?
I would think he would say it because that's going to be when we're going to see Saturn retrograding. Well, actually, yeah, that's going to be
Jupiter into
Jupiter into Gemini?
Yeah, I would say that,
because
like I said, the golden months of the year really are May and June, in a matter of speech, because after that, things are going to start getting really intense again. So this little window that we have here, and for some people it's going to begin in April actually, it really is going to push us forward. And the reason for that is because, like I said, we are wrapping up Taurus. Uranus and Jupiter are really that ultimate, the shakeups and breakthroughs, as I call it, because we're wrapping up Taurus. So anything that is pending, anything that you're waiting for, or that you have been holding back on, it's gonna be pushed to finalize around that time. After that, we have a little bit more of the, the other forces that are going to be bringing our focus into other directions. But those 2 months, they are, I guess you could say, the most peaceful months. And also, when Jupiter goes into Gemini, this is going to be a new energy that is going to be, pretty exciting for a lot of people, because it is going to trine Pluto. So it will give us that opportunity also to look into the future. Even though we're not fully ready to step into it yet, we are being able to look at it. So it is a window where, things could happen over there. Now, it's not that it needs to or it has to. This also has to do a lot with individual charts and how these energies are interacting with your chart. But I agree that these 2 months really are the months where things most likely are going to happen moving forward, helping you move forward.
Good, thank you. Anybody else?
I was just going to, real quickly, so there are economic cycles that relate to astrological cycles. And in particular, when we look at the North Node, historically, when the North Node is in Leo, to Cancer, to Gemini, that tends to be when markets, and the housing market in particular, when they do a little bit better. And there are nuances with this, and like Raquel said, with your own chart, you'll notice you want to talk with your astrologer when making any of these decisions. And then usually when the North Node is down in Aquarius, that's when the markets reach a dip, or the low point in their 18-and-a-half-year cycle. And usually there's a real turning point when the North Node is in Taurus, which was last year. And so I think we have a little buffer zone economically this year. Next year, things start going toward the bottom part of that nodal cycle. So I think if you are making any kind of financial decisions this year, you're going to be a little better protected, but there will be great buying opportunities, I think, as we get closer to the North Node's movement into Aquarius, so next year and the year after.
Yeah, I was gonna say that this is not a traditional time. It's usually, when Saturn and Pluto start to retrograde, you just start going, okay, yeah, if I'm making a choice now, I'm stuck with it through a retrograde of the rest of the year. That's really how it is, but this is different because we're going to see Pluto ingress back into Capricorn. So again, there's going to be so many people like, oh my God, Jupiter's coming in. When Jupiter coming into a sign it's a blimp that when it finally then retrogrades, it blows up. And then you have to figure out what happened for 4 months. So I don't look at Jupiter ingress into a new sign as exciting at all. I'm like, this is lesson that's coming in. It's the end of the lesson. But I would say with financial, we have no idea what the whole new financial structures are going to look like. And then with relationships, do you really want to just like throw it all out there at this moment when it's going to be radically conflicting? And there's already Pluto that deals with all the jealousy and the deeper emotions in Aquarius and the weird situations that happen. So you're going to be like so sure, I'm making the best relationship choice of my life. And then, oh wait, they just cheated on me. But I was cheating on the person, that I did that. It's like, oh man, this would be the year to be like your best. I wouldn't be making some crazy moves as far as the traditional way of doing it.
Yeah, markets are very volatile right now until Uranus leaves Taurus and enters Gemini. It's volatile.
I have a comment.
Oh wait, somebody said the.
One question, a quick one. Mars Uranus on Algol, July 15th. What's going to happen? In your opinions?
Diamonds.
Algol is a star that Ptolemy said was the most treacherous star in the sky. Here we come back to one of my little pet soapbox themes that I'm going to be talking about at my afternoon lecture. It's evening at 6 o'clock. And that is that we have to remember that astrology was written by guys for guys. It's a product. Now, I'm not saying that females didn't have an intuitive sense of nature and the movement of the planet way before the guys measured it and made it into a science. However, Algol is the story. Algol, for those of you who don't know, is the star that's associated with beheading. It is the beheaded Medusa, and basically Medusa, as you may or may not, we know Medusa as the Gorgon who had snakes in her hair, and if you looked at her, you turned to stone. Well, surprise, Medusa was the first Me Too victim. Medusa basically was caught being raped by Neptune. And she was gorgeous, and she was a bit vain about her beautiful hair. But it was Athene, it was a temple of Athena, who basically came to the situation of seeing Neptune and Medusa in the process, and she couldn't punish the god Neptune because you don't do that, so she punished Medusa. There's nothing wrong with Algol unless, like Ptolemy and the patriarchy, you're suppressing femininity. That's the story. That Algol has an incredibly bad rap. You talk about Algol in a group of astrologers and everyone goes, but basically the feminine energy turns into Medusa when it's suppressed. It becomes horrific. And it was basically, Medusa's beheading that created that star, so it's associated with. Now, interestingly enough, I did a talk on this a while back. I'll make this very quick. And I just put it up on my YouTube channel, and it was about Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump, who have a whole Algol connection. And I got an email from someone who said, I was 5 minutes into your talk, I thought you were talking about Al Gore. Yeah. So I did what any good astrologer does, and I went and I looked at Al Gore's chart. And Al Gore has Venus at 27 degrees of Taurus, exactly conjunct Algol. And it was the week that the Supreme Court ruled against the hanging Chads in Florida and gave that election to Bush. Transiting Saturn was conjuncting Algol and Gore's Venus. So. That doesn't answer your question about Mars.
I was going to say, I think
I'd like to add a
discovery
bit to that.
Yeah, anyhow, that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, so amazing. I think just a couple mythological things. Perseus cut her head off by Athena's
Cheating. He
instructions
was cheating.
to save his mother from the patriarchy. So read the myth, please, because that's a part that's often left out. His mother, Danae, right? He was the son of Jupiter. And I don't want to tell the whole story because we'll be here forever. But I have noticed some interesting things with Algol. I'm glad you asked and that you noticed. I'm not surprised that you have. We had eclipses on Antares and Algol during lockdown crazy. And I was seeing a lot of things around the heart. Right? Antares, the heart of the scorpion. And a lot of things about beheading. It wasn't necessarily that, but I saw kids and I couldn't see their faces because they were hidden in masks. And I thought that was a pretty interesting experience of Algol. I mean, Algol, interestingly, well, I'll say Randall Carlson, who I'm sure many of you know of, kind of rogue independent researcher, geologist, believes that the comet that came and struck the Earth and almost completely killed the human species so long ago came from that zone of the sky, and that's why Algol has a bad rap. Of that, I'm not sure. I will say in the magical tradition, Algol is known to be a really positive and powerful star to work with, and it might even be an election to look to. With Mars there, I'm not so sure, but Algol has a lot of Mars energy in it, and Algol is associated with a diamond. And so there's something actually just in that idea of pressure and diamond that's inherent in that star. So I'm also not answering your question besides saying,
Hey, Brett. Hey, Brett.
Is just one thing to add. The Republican National Convention is that day. It's on Trump's midheaven. That was the thing I was looking at, but I was just curious if there were. I'm probably missing something else in the research. But.
No,
I
that
would
sounds
see it more as a positive thing than something that's gonna like behead somebody.
Well, I was gonna say, since I have a moon on Algol, that it's a binary star of two stars that one has the light that starts coming and then it dims, and then the other one. So there's almost like it looks like this is the light, this is it, this is the diamond, and then nope, and then the other binary star starts blinking, and it's a very inconsistent like way of doing it. So you could be thinking this is the light, it looks like it's blinking, and then nope, the other binary star. So to me, that could be like, oh, it looks like it's gonna be this person, and then no, it's not, and there's a deep kind of sacrificial kind of like, now you gotta be doing this, and now we're gonna have to all deal with Nikki Haley and cut her head off. But no, like I really feel that deeply though. There's more discovery with the Uranus aspect there of with James Webb right now, and something that could be something that forever we've always thought was this, but could be something else that was like, oh my gosh, this is really what this is out there. That's more of what I would predict. The election stuff this year to me is all a show. I think we're gonna realize it's a complete show. Yeah.
Right.
Like full blown, like people are gonna wake up. It's all a show.
Wait, did you say show or scam?
Both. I mean both. Yeah. Like the whole thing, and nobody's gonna be happy. So.
Yes, you had a question.
Hey,
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody for showing up and bringing your work to the world. My name is Darby, and I consider myself a philosopher. And truth, the word truth keeps coming up, and I see it being misused a lot. Truth is what we can gather from observing objective reality, right? So time, space, death, and we're also talking about an element of truth here, the planets, right? Which is why a lot of philosophers studied astrology and other things. So my thing is we're in the pursuit of truth, right? Like that's why we study the planets. That's why we're trying to discover, health remedies and flower essences, and we're trying to discover truth. And truth is discoverable in the natural world by objective reality. So the magician's card and
you have a question in there somewhere?
I just have to build up to the question really quick.
Okay,
It's
quicker.
a phenomenal question.
Sounds very Putin, right?
But the magician's card is he's not. My truth is not on the table. The elements are. The elements that are ruled by laws. We're all ruled by laws. We're bound by them.
Okay,
And so I want to pose to the panel here. Truth is not subjective, it's objective. And do you see the conflict within the community of people observing truth as objective reality and people believing they can create their own truth? Which then it's like you are then validating and saying that everyone has a valid and equal truth. So you would have to validate the serial killer or the slave owner. You would have to validate everyone.
Okay, so your question is?
I'm posing it to the panel. Do they see a conflict? Because this is what we're all doing here.
Okay,
we're
so
seeking truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is truth Sagittarius or Gemini?
Anyone want to tackle that one?
It's Gemini.
Well, when we talk about philosophy and truth, I think we need to consider, obviously there's lots of perspectives here, and this is not going to be answered, but Nietzsche talked about how in the correct use of the word nihilism, that truth, what we call truth with a capital T, God with a capital G, is like a top of the mountain, and that which is at the top of the mountain through its normal cycle, we might say Pluto, becomes devalued and goes to the bottom and works its way back up. That even the objective reality of truth might not be truth with a capital T, but be truth with a small letter t. And in fact, I look at the work of Rupert Sheldrake, who reminds us that what we call laws of nature are likely not laws, they're habits. And that's, I'm not going further down that particular rabbit hole, but it's a good question, and I don't think we can answer it.
Right. I think it's a whole nother panel.
Just something really quick, that if you have like a letter 6, or number 6, and you have two people standing on either side of it, one's going to see a 6 and one's going to see a 9. So it's all about where we're standing in our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true for both of them. It's like, no.
But in its extremes, it does become problematic, like Darby said.
Absolutely.
It can, one person justify, killing as a truth, and yet we as a culture seem to do that all the time.
Well, I think this one thing, if you look at I'm the theology person here, if you look at the universal principle that underlies all major religions and even pagan religions and Wicca, it is do as ye will, harm none. So love your neighbor as yourself. And I think a lot of people would argue or would validate that seems to be true. And so that could be one connecting point that links, that is a truth to be rooted in. But
Except the complexity of that is that someone else would say, then that means that you should not, or that it's unethical to kill an animal that one eats.
Can I
Okay,
give a
I'm
more
gonna stop
practical, super fast, a very
Yeah.
practical example that you, Rick, mentioned? Pluto and Aquarius, AI, ETs. Yes, it's a fact. It's on our doorstep. What do you think is going to happen to our perception of truth, about our reality, about our planet, about what is possible, about our government, once that really comes into full disclosure? That's just one example.
Yes, okay. And next question.
Stay
Thank
out-
you.
out one. Good
Great question, and at the beginning of a panel, that's a good topic. All right, thank you. Yes.
Hello, my name is Zoe. Thank you guys for all your wisdom, and I love talking about truth and the many truths, the universal truths that seem to be few and that are opening in the age of Aquarius. So in the birthing of this transitional period into the age of Aquarius, I, as an astrologer, get a lot of questions around, well, what's the new astrology? Well, what's the new geometry? Well, what about the 13th sign? Well, aren't we like integrating more things and more fields? And then, the 12 being the number of the whole and of the universe. And actually, Andrew Collins talked yesterday about the dodecahedron of the black hole at the center of our galaxy, and this 12, right? So part of me is very traditional. My Mercury Saturn's like, oh no, the ancients, the roots, the geometries, it's not gonna change. It's gonna expand. But do we think that there is a new astrology? Do we think that there's new dimensions opening, and how do you see that potentially taking form?
Great.
That's the subject of my talk at 6 o'clock this evening.
There we go. All right.
The dodecahedron can't change, but
That's truth.
But we can, but we can start to see new dimensions of it, right? So, I mean, to me, it looks like 12 pentagons, but that's because I'm looking from this place. So, and I mean, it's a great shape to bring into the picture because the shape of the universe, the shape of the earth, like the old history school, right? It's at the center of the opening new eyes to the old shape so that we can see more of them and what's happening.
And you can't have a 13th sign to a system that is based upon the division of a circle into 12. Period.
Amen.
End.
Yeah.
13
All right.
is the center.
Okay, and we have 5 minutes left. And so if you have a very quick question, good.
Thank you so much, everyone. I don't know much about astrology, but I'm also here seeking the truth. I'm an entrepreneur, a legal professional, and a healthcare professional. And what I'm seeing in my community is absolutely horrendous. I used to own preschools and infant cares, and I used to work with small business owners. And my question is, with everything that's happening with the creation of this one world order, like World Economic Forum, why is that they're timing everything towards 2030? It sounds like we don't have much time. A lot of business owners are on their last leg, a lot of professionals, and it feels as if families are under threat. Like you use the word mom or dad, it's considered violent towards certain demographics, and it's, to me, it feels like war on middle class and families, and the sacredness of certain words like mom, dad. And I was wondering if you could shed some light in terms of how the powers that play use astrology and why they're timing this the way they are, and if you have any advice for the common person like me who doesn't know anything about astrology and is seeking the truth.
Can I answer this one real quick?
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
I would just say that it's the illusion that they're using it. That they're not using it, that they're in the unconscious realm of the last bit of control that they don't realize. I know a lot of people are afraid, but if you look at the history, this is where all those leaders and all those people fall.
I want to say, I feel you, and thank you so much for sharing your heart and asking that question.
Yeah.
So there was a question, the first question was like, yo, should we like get together or break up before this date? 2030 might be that. It might be like, hey, we need to grab the gold before we can't. Because there's a force that's happening called you. And all of us. And, you know, we don't wake up from dreams, we wake up from nightmares. And so we're at that kind of, that trigger point now. And I think if the laws aren't all passed by 2030, and frankly, even if they are, it's just kind of when this whole thing's gonna shake apart. So I just say, stay open.
Yeah. And thank you for that question. And thank all of you, right? What a great panel. Can't ask for a better group of people. So I'm going to give like 15 seconds to each person to kind of like, if there's something you need to share.
I think someone else should take my 10 or 15 seconds and split it up. I've said what I need to say.
There we go.
I'll see some of you at 6 o'clock today and some of you at, I think, 2 o'clock tomorrow.
Yes, I think it's 2 o'clock. Kaylin.
I just want to say the total solar eclipse happening on April 8th. If you get to see it, it's life-changing if you have never seen one before. And some years ago, I came across this little quote I'm going to share.
Oh, that's right.
And it's from Tolkien. And he says, "All that is gold does not glitter. Not all who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woke. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king." Now, in a total solar eclipse, when it comes back, the light springs out of the darkness. And so I also did just a little addition to a light from the shadows shall gleam. The crownless again shall be queen. And also, I think it was a renewed shall be trust that was broken instead of the blade that was broken. So it was just another way of energizing that. So this is what we have as a possibility with this total solar eclipse on April 8th.
All right, so get out and see it.
I was just going to say, because we see in this community people feeling fractured, that remember that the dark can't use this gift of astrology and any of these spiritual tools. It will not work for them. It never does. People have put too much emphasis on that. Oh, the dark's using astrology, and then anybody doing all these divination tools are part of the dark. It doesn't work for them. It backfires. It ruins their lives.
It's not nice to fool Mother Nature.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that we have to remember that. And then I think it was great, like with what Brett was saying. It's like, you know, like if somebody's maybe going down a path where they're feeling like, oh, this is dark, and they go somewhere, like they're gonna like keep the fire on when their eyes are open, but if they're asleep in it, let them figure it out,
Yeah.
So,
Great. And David is going to be speaking.
I'm after Rick in the same room after
Yay.
Rick at 8 p.m. So
Great.
I'm his warm-up act. Yep.
Okay, right. And that's the Carmel room, and then tomorrow you are
Tomorrow,
at 5.
I don't remember what.
Post-conference at 5. I know, I remember all that. Okay, Rachel.
So I think, I think the fact that I'm a professional astrologer did not hide it during my campaign, and I got elected into public office. Yes. I think that's where we're moving. And I, and so being able to be in the rooms with decision makers, and I'm serving on a policy committee for the entire state of California, and I think this is the pathway. More of you need to get involved and do what you can in your local communities, because that's where all change starts. And that's what we're gonna see as Pluto enters Aquarius. And then also just, every aspect of my campaign, with astrology, I worked with magic, I went canvassing with planetary hours. And so I think that there are so many ways that we can incorporate astrology into places where it has not been accepted. And so I'm really optimistic, and if anyone wants to find out how to do that or how to campaign using the techniques that I used, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm into mentoring spiritual leaders, so that's something that we really need more of.
Yay, thank you. Gemini, because we do have another panel coming in.
Okay, first of all, I love Rick Levine.
Aww.
Mwah.
Secondly, I will also be doing a talk. I'm after David, who's after Rick tomorrow. It's about realigning with celestial time, so to make sure that we don't lose the sun and the moon in our calendar and the days. And so come there and stay human with me. It's been a treat to be here, absolutely, and I love this idea of astrologers in office. One thing that I do, and I'll be doing it in March, is I lead tours in Washington, D.C. to show how D.C. is a star map in the art and the alignments. It's an amazing thing, and I hope that we can remember that technology and use it in a positive way, and I'm so glad to be surrounded by people who are doing just that.
I will leave you with these words that we are entering into a new paradigm. That's the exciting news. So the future begins now, and I too work with mentoring the new leaders that are rising. This is an era for new leaders to rise. So my passion is to help you see that and step into it. So new paradigm from here on out. Thank you.
All right.
Shima,
Yes.
the Alpha and the Omega. Think cosmically, but act locally. It does no good at all to push your mind out to the outer edges unless you do something with it in your immediate environment.
True. Yay, thank you. And thank you all for being here and for sharing this information with your friends so that we can continue to be bringing in a cosmological perspective to Conscious Life Expo and beyond. And let's take a photo, boys and girls. Something fun. Oh, and if you want to talk to anyone, any of our astrologers here, please do it out in the hallway, because we do have another panel happening, the Ascension panel.